Hiya, everybody. That's how my granddaughter tells me hello when she comes to see me. So I thought I'd say hi to everybody else out there that way. So, what's the word this week? And the word I'm gonna try and say it without any kind of accent whatsoever, so you can really try to get it. It's Epichoregeo. I hope that doesn't have an accent. But if you're like me, I have a Mexican accent, and it probably sounds a little more like Epichoregeo, Epichoregeo, right? That sounds more Mexican. If you got a little more of an Italian accent, it's like Epichoregeo, mamma mia. Except not the mamma mia part. If you're down south Texas, it's probably a little more like Epichoregeo, partner. And if you're a Terminator fan, it's probably like Epichoregeo. All right, let's get it. What's up? Welcome back. What's the word for this week? Well, the word comes from the Greek and it's Epichoregeo, which is another word. Our word for it is supply. Now, this word, Epichoregeo, is used 5 times in the New Testament, and we find it in Philippians 1:19. Let me read. For I know that through your prayers and the support of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will result in my deliverance. Key word in that is support. Now, when we look at this word, we break it down. The first part of this word, epi, E-P-I, means upon. Corregio, the second part of this word, means to furnish upon, to fully give lavishly, and to give a provision abundantly. And then we get the English word choreography from this. And if you don't know what choreography means, it means dancing. It means a collection of movements and steps to make a complete arrangement. And then a little more knowledge for you guys. This whole word was first started way back in the day, obviously, right? The state would put on these big plays, and a lot of times these things would cost a lot of money. So the state would get together with like other poets, and they try to find kind of like a sponsor, how we would relate to it today, a sponsor, someone who would be willing to be the choir master. And this person would be of great wealth, and they would, they love the arts so much that they were willing to pay the actors and the actresses, the poets, the musicians, pay their wages so they can spend the time learning this craft and doing the whole play that they're putting on. And then also, it wasn't just that though; it was also to give so much above that so that they can live besides their wages. And it would be the choir master's whole job to provide everything and anything that the people putting on this play would need. So when we take what we've already kind of gone over, right? Dancing and supply. And when I was first hearing this, I'm thinking to myself, like, these are such strange words to express, what God does for us, right? And I think to myself, like, why dancing? Why supply? Right? Well, how does that fit, right? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to summarize a quick story for you, and it comes from Matthew. It comes from Matthew 14, and it's found in verses 13 through 21. And what happens is that this story is one of the stories where Jesus feeds a multitude of people. And it's a story of abundance. And what happens is they number 5,000, right? But they say 5,000 men. And it says not including women and children. So you got to figure there's 5,000 men. At least half of them are married, right? And at least, they have a few kids in tow. So you got to figure that's a lot of people, right? Well, they're looking for food to feed all these people. They don't want to send them away. They start off with 5 loaves and 2 fish, which probably enough to feed a family of 5. But, Jesus gets this food. He prays over it. And then by the end of the story, he feeds everybody, and there's a surplus. There's a surplus of the disciples go around and pick up all that's left, and there's 12 baskets full of leftovers. Okay, now these weren't like tiny little baskets either. These baskets stood about 3 to 4 feet tall, and they were big baskets. And to have 12 left over, it's the picture of abundance that God provides us. And to go along with this, this idea of supply, personally, I know what it's like to be in a position of not having enough. A couple years back, I spent some time in the military, and back in basic training, where I was at was in Oklahoma, and it was a time when it was very, very cold, and we'd be out there doing military exercises, and in the mornings we'd all be huddled up waiting for the trucks to come with our food for the morning for breakfast, and it was always so cold out there. I mean, it was so cold. For instance, let me give you an example. We used to have to carry these little canteens of water, and in the morning I'm getting up and we're standing out there, and I go to get some water out of my canteen, and I twist the top off, and it's so cold that it snaps at the whole top of my canteen off, and so I couldn't really even drink from it, and the water inside was like kind of like a slush, right? And so that shows you how cold it was out there. And in basic training, they don't allow you a whole lot of like cold weather gear as well, because they want you to kind of suffer. They kind of want to break you down. And so us guys would be out there waiting, and we'd huddle up. And unfortunately for me, since I was a bigger guy, the way it works is the bigger guys stand on the outside, and the little guys stand on the inside, and the bigger guys kind of shelter, hold off the cold. And unlucky for me, I was that guy, and I hated it. I would be so cold out there, and so we'd have to be out there doing push-ups to get the blood going, get warm. But we'd be out there waiting, and then the miracle would happen. We'd see the trucks coming with the food, and we would start to dream. We would start to dream of hot bacon and eggs and toast, and just it was like a 5-star meal. And they'd get up there, they'd start to arrange the table with the food, and you'd see these containers as they pulled them off the truck, and you could see the heat because it's so cold. Any kind of heat, you could see the smoke coming off these containers, and it would just make your stomach grumble so much more because you're cold and you want that food. And there you go. The drill sergeants would get up there first. They'd get their food. You'd see them pouring their hot coffee, and man, I couldn't wait to get down there. After they would get their food, we were allowed to go, as it would work out for me. By the time I got down there and got to my place where I could get some food, to my heartbreak, there was no more bacon. There was hardly any eggs, and there was like a little triangle of toast, and no coffee. That was my heartbreak of being in a short supply. And then the other side of that kind of supply, though, is also another military story. My brother-in-law, who also served in the U.S. military, his actual job in the military was supply. And he would tell me these stories of when he was in Iraq. He was deployed, and he would have to drive, 4 to 6 hours one way to go drop off supply for all the guys that were out there, and then he had to drive 4 hours back. And it was dangerous. There's roadside bombs. There's always danger out there. But he'd go out there and he'd be excited about his job because he knew he was taking things that were needed out in the battlefield. And it was so funny that he would tell me that when he would get out there, it was kind of the same thing that I experienced. These guys would see him coming, and they would be excited. They would be happy because they were short on things like toilet paper and meals and stuff like that. And when he'd get out there, these guys were so excited to see him. And he would have all the supplies they needed, and it would be not just supply for the day, but it would be for like a week or two as they rotated that supply coming out to them. So he was the man, right? He'd get out there, and he would be, I could just imagine they'd get him out of his truck and have him on their shoulders, throwing him up and saying, hip, hip, hooray, because he's there with supply, you know what I mean? But I can imagine that it was very exciting to get what you need. And so in the same way, I relate these things of how God has done for us in this life. So be encouraged that you have that supply. Now the next thing is why dancing, right? Like if you ever look at somebody trying to learn dance moves, they usually teach you one step at a time. When you learn a dance move, or when you see people taking dancing lessons, they learn a dance or two at a time. But imagine that if you went to a dance class and you learned like one step, and then you thought, well, that's good, I'm a dancer now, and then that's all you ever did, you would look pretty funny always just doing that one dance, right? And so I imagine like how God tried to teach us things, and imagine if we're just like, well, I'll take that one thing and then that's it. We would have a life in short supply because we only took that one thing. But one step that you learn, and then you learn more steps, and you continue those steps until you make a whole arrangement of a dance move, right? I don't know about any of you guys. Back when I was a younger guy in high school, there was this thing called well, it's probably still around, I guess, but like a b-boy, like a breakdance fighter and stuff like that, and that was my thing. We'd go out to like a debut or a party, and they'd put certain music on, and then the crowds would get around, and I'd always make my way in there and kind of try to, you're like mad dogging somebody else, and then before you know it, a breakdance fight breaks out, you know what I mean? And I would be there and breakdance fighting. But all those dance moves, I just didn't show up and be great at breakdancing. It took practice. I would do choreography in the mirror. I would do one or two moves and then add and add and add. And it's the same way, I think, how God means this word of dancing, of choreography. There's so many things in this Christian life that he gives us that we can add upon, that we take one and we just add and add and add. So is that to say that God gave us an abundance of dance moves? Well, maybe not for all of us, right? I know there's some people out there who aren't great dancers. I don't think that's what it means, that we got an abundance of dance moves, but it really speaks to our relationship with God. If you are trying to dance with somebody, there is a person who leads and there's a person who follows. So imagine that you're dancing this life with God, and he's wanting to lead and you're supposed to follow. Sometimes we want to lead though, right? God's like, come with me, and we're like, no, this dance step is better. And what happens in that situation? We wind up stepping on some toes, right? Imagine stepping on God's toes, right? But that's what happens sometimes. And I think that's what God means when he says he can give this abundant life of supply, and it's like a dance, it's a choreography, but we have to allow him to lead. And once Jesus came, he came and he died for us and rose again. Before he left us the Holy Spirit. It was meant to give us that abundant life, to give us the resources for this life. In John 10:10, it says, he came so that we would have life and have it abundantly. 2 Peter 1:3 says, his divine power has given us all the things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of him who has called us by his own glory and excellence. So in this Holy Spirit, right, that we're given, this helper that we're given to deal with this world, right? We have the resources. In Galatians 5:22-23, Peter listed these characteristics of a godly life. And we shouldn't think of them like beads on a string or stages of development. The word translates add, which really means to supply generously again. So in other words, we develop one quality as we exercise another quality, like dancing, taking one step onto another and another, much in the way the branch relates to the trunk, the way the twigs relate to the branch. And so when you're taking all these things, right, these qualities help us grow in a life dedicated unto Jesus. So it's not enough for us to say, let go and let God, like as if, all the spiritual work is on his part. He's given us these things, and it's up to us to apply those things in our life. And and don't confuse me as well. I'm not saying, hey, try to be a better person. We will always fail at trying to be a better person if it's for ourselves or for somebody else. We shouldn't be striving to be a better person. We should be striving to be like Jesus. So don't confuse that part either. As we do this life, right? As we strive to live like unto Jesus and be like Jesus, we take these graces that are given and we strive in this life. And we strive in this life to have this abundance and use this supply that we are given. And if we mess up, it's okay. God's grace is sufficient for us. That's found in 2 Corinthians 12:9. And if we stumble, that's okay as well, as long as we're getting up and we're moving on. We're not dwelling in that place. Romans 5:12 says, where sin increased, grace increased all the more. So those are blessings that we have. Those are abundant things that we have. We are provided abundant supply. And lastly, in Hebrews 12:1, it says, therefore, since we are encompassed with such a great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin that entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. This life is a race. We take all these things, right, that we just discussed. We apply them as a dance into our life. All these things that are given to us in supply for this life, that's given to us abundantly. We have this grace that protects us. If we stumble, God gives us grace. All these things that we talked about, if you looked them up earlier, all those gifts of the Spirit, love and compassion and self-control, all these things aren't there to keep us down, but they're to help us to strive to be better. And we're given the strength from the Holy Spirit to do these things. We run this race, right? This marathon of life. I want you to think of this Olympic champion. He was a long distance runner, and his name was Paavo Nurmi, and he was from Finland. And he won 12 gold medals. And one of the things that he would do when he ran that made him famous was that he would carry a stopwatch. And he would keep track, the stopwatch as he's running, to keep track of how he's doing, how he's running. Because it's good for us to keep track, right, of how we're doing in this long race. If you want to win, you not only have to train to win, but you got to keep track of how you're doing, so you know, right? So I challenge you, let Jesus keep the pace. As long as you're keeping your eyes on him, obviously Jesus is always going to be ahead of us, right? Because we're not perfect. We're not Jesus, but we can strive to be. And as we're striving, like you do in a race, as you're striving in this life, you keep your eyes on the pace setter. That is Jesus Christ. So let him set the pace. You keep your eyes on him, and you will see how you're doing in this life. And allow these things, these graces that we are given, these gifts of the Spirit to guide us, to help us to be like him. So I leave you with that. I pray that you have a great week. I pray that you are blessed in every way, that God go before you in everything you touch and every person you speak to, that you have his favor, and that you are highly blessed, and that you know you are highly blessed. You are favored. You belong to the King. That's it for us, guys. We'll see you again next week. God bless. Peace.